Good day everyone, my name is Yapjiteng and my metric number is 269697. In list of Malaysia law, Innkeepers Act 1952, also known as Act 248. This act established 29 May 1952. The policy maker already made this act and can use in accommodation field. This Malaysia Innkeepers Act 1952 was inspired by United Kingdom. The objective of Innkeepers Act is to provide relief to innkeepers. Thus, with this act, innkeepers have a guideline from law about what rights they have and what they are responsible to the guests. It also focuses about legal to the innkeepers and accommodation operator during their operation. The word innkeepers is referring to owner or host of the inn. It can be ownership either the company or corporation. In Innkeepers Act 1952 have a right to sell any things left by guests if the guests not claiming back their things. This act is meant to limit the responsibility of the property owner to a certain amount. However, such limitations do not apply if the loss or damage to the goods is caused by the property owner's willful act or negligence. This Innkeepers Act 1952 clearly explains what can do and cannot do by innkeepers.
Next, I will continue my part, which is contained in the Innkeepers Act 1952. Overall, there are 7 sections on this act. The first section is a short title and application, which is number 1. This act may be cited as the Innkeepers Act 1952, and number 2, this act applies to Peninsular Malaysia only. The second section about interpretation. The familiar terms that are often used in this act, which is goods, that means any movable property. Inn means any hotel, boarding house, or other places where any person is accommodated. And the last is innkeeper, mean the keeper of any types of inn, which is including a company or corporation. The third section elaborates on the power of the sale of goods deposit with the innkeeper. An innkeeper has a right absolutely to sell by public auction any goods which may have been deposited with him or left in the inn he keeps, or any garage, car park, or other premises appurtenant such as premise. The person depositing or leaving such goods shall be or become in debt to the innkeeper for any board or lodging. Next, the first section about the limitation of innkeeper's liability. In this section, there are 2 limitations on the innkeeper's liability. Then, section 5 is about refusal to accept property for safe custody. Section 6 is a copy of section 4 to be displayed. Every innkeeper must have at least 1 copy of section 4, which is a limitation of innkeeper's liability. Last but not least, section 7 is about repeal, which is the innkeeper's liability ordinance of the Straits Settlement is hereby repealed. Now we move to the explanation of the Innkeepers Act 1952. As I have mentioned before, Innkeepers Act 1952 has 7 sections. Then section 3 is related to the power of sale of goods stored with the property owner. In addition to the usual line, the owner of the inn has the absolute right to sell any item stored with him or left in his inn. The proceeds of the sale will be used to pay off guest debt. And finally, the notice was published a month earlier in the Malaysian press. Furthermore, Section 4 is about the limitation of innkeeper's liability. No innkeeper shall be liable to make a good to any guest of such innkeeper any loss or injury to goods brought to his inn, not being a horse or other live animal, or any gear appertaining thereto, or any car or carriage to a greater amount than the sum of 500 ringgit, except in the following cases, such as A, where such goods shall have been stolen, lost or injured through the wilful act, default or neglect of such innkeeper or any servant in his employ. B. Where such goods shall have been deposited expressly for safe custody with such innkeeper or his manager, for example, that the guest shall at the time of such deposit declare the value of such goods, and that such goods shall be deposited in a box or other receptacle fastened and sealed by the person depositing the same. Next, Section 5 is a refusal to accept property for safe custody. An innkeeper or manager may refuse to accept a guest property for safekeeping if the declared worth exceed 5,000 ringgit. If a guest is unable to deposit such good as specified, the innkeeper will no longer be entitled to the benefit of a section of this Act. Section 6 is a copy of Section 4 to be exhibited. This means every innkeeper must have and display at least one copy of Section 4. Plus, the innkeeper should display in a place that can be seen on the property. Lastly, Section 7 is repeal. The innkeeper's liability ordinance of the street settlement is hereby repealed. As can be seen here, this act provides fundamental preservation to those who work in the hospitality industry.
The first is application of the act. The act is applicable to Peninsular Malaysia, include Federal Territory of Kuala Lumpur and Labuan. The act expressly excluded its application to Sabah and Sarawak. Thus, what about the innkeeper's duty and liabilities in Sabah and Sarawak? Sabah has its own statute that limits the liability of the innkeepers. The Innkeepers Ordinance 1951 governs the relationship between the innkeepers and guests in Sabah. So the objective of the Ordinance and Innkeepers Acts also differs. The second point is the innkeeper's right over guest property. That's called right of lien. This point is focused on the innkeeper's right over the property of guests in the event of guest default in paying the bill for the accommodation or food and drink. The right of innkeepers in this situation is known as the innkeeper's right of lien, which is a common law right explicitly provided in the Innkeepers Act 1952. The third point is about the limitation of innkeepers of liability. This point is that deserves scrutiny is concerning the statutory limitation of innkeepers' liability. The common law has imposed a duty upon the innkeeper to ensure that the guests and their personal belongings are safe during their stay at the premise.
So what is the advantages of this act? Actually, the purpose of this act is to provide relief to the innkeepers, and it applies only in a Peninsular Malaysia. So one of the few advantages of this act is the innkeepers have a right to keep items belonging to the guest if the guest does not pay service that may charge to them. So this is because there are many guests who are not paid for the accommodation service, such as a food and beverage bills. If this bill is not paid, then the host has a right to hold the guest's belongings. So this right has called as a lens. So what is lens? Lens is a legal right to keep property equal to the amounts of unpaid bill, and it is used to compel a guest to pay the bill. So the next advantages of this act is the innkeepers has the right to confiscate items that should not be brought by the guest. So if the items that are prohibited to be bought by the guests can be confiscated by the innkeepers. So the last but not least, the guests will feel the advantages is the guests will feel safe for leaving their personal belongings. It is because if the employee thefts or damage the guest property.
So we move on to the next part, which is any related cases on Innkeeper Act 1952. Based on our finding, there are several cases that are related to Innkeeper Act, but however, the cases that occur in South Carolina has attracted our interest. During the journey from Florida to Connecticut, Joseph and his wife stopped at Holiday Inn to stay during the vacation. After registering and checking at the hotel, they went to a restaurant to have dinner. The duration from the hotel to the restaurant is about 50 minutes. When they came back to the hotel, they noticed and find out that the luggage that contained jewelry has lost, and Joseph has accused and sued the innkeeper of negligence. The innkeepers deny and charge and argue. There is a safety box which is available in the guest room, but Joseph denied that there are no safety box inside the room. If there are a safety box, of course he will put his valuable item inside the box. As a result, this section does not apply if any innkeepers fail to post notice and the innkeeper's liability is not reduced. Similarly, even if any innkeepers is careless, if proper notice is posted, the innkeeper is not responsible for any money or jewelry that is left inside the guest bedroom. This limit liability applies not only when visitors follow the properly posted.
In conclusion, in terms of hotel security, theft and loss of goods can occur at any time. Theft occurrence in hotel, particularly those involving guests, are accidentally damaging, causing embarrassment and in some cases significant non-monetary losses. In deduction, based on the research and our understanding found that the current Innkeepers Act of 1952 is no longer relevant or appropriate for dealing with the current situation. Laws must be updated on a regular basis to keep up with the ever-changing and increasingly complex legal environment as well as current industry practice. This because the previous law could not be converted into the modern business context as envisioned in the new Innkeepers Act 1952. It was rendered obsolete. Next, I'll present about the recommendation. Based on Innkeepers Act 1952, the law is too old and not suitable for use, so it should be changed in many ways to ensure that the law is in line with the current time. Therefore, the government needs to repair the loopholes of the Innkeepers Act 1952 so that it will be more convenient in the current scenario. Besides, the Innkeepers Act of 1952 really need to be included in the proposal that has been discussed previously so that they can improve it to be better for the current situation. Not only that, the government needs to raise the limit of innkeepers' liability because the innkeepers have been in disadvantage if this keeps going. As we saw, the current innkeepers' right for lien is very insignificant and it had made them feel pressure a lot. They also need to use various language for the notice of Section 4 so that the foreign guests will easily understand it. Other than that, there's a need to be uniformity in the law in Malaysia. If there is no uniformity, there will be 3 different sets of laws that are separate according to Peninsula, Malaysia, Sabah, and Sarawak. This will increase guest protection and dispel all confusion for having different laws regarding accommodation operator in Malaysia. This law also need to be used not only for 5-star hotel but need to cover every accommodation type of business including the small one.